Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a 3 looks, 1 palette video using my Natasha Denona Glam palette. I had a lot of fun with this one. I felt like this palette ended up being a lot more versatile and a lot more inspiring than I initially thought it would be, but I did forget to film an intro. So if you're interested in getting some inspiration for looks from this palette, then I hope you'll keep on watching. Alright, so for look number 1, I think I'm going to go for something a little bit more taupey. It's funny, the first time I ever saw this palette like in person in store, I just thought it looked so boring. I thought it looked super dusty and all of the colors looked the same. But looking at the swatches, there's actually quite a few different tones going on. I mean, especially in the shimmers, you have a pink, you have peach, you've got those more kind of taupey silver shades, you have a gold, more bronzy shades. So there's actually a lot more variation than I thought with this palette. So I'm going to try to go for something a little bit more cool toned and taupey, and we will see what it ends up looking like. So I'm going to start with the shade Transition. So it's sort of like a dove gray, almost like cement sort of color. And I'm going to start by putting that through the crease. I washed my brushes last night, which was honestly a huge pain, but they really needed it, and now I feel very smug and satisfied that all of my brushes are spotless. Okay, I'll be honest, I don't really see that shade on my eyes. If anything, it's giving a very, very subtle contour to the crease. It's almost more like a lid setting shade for me. So I'm going to take a little bit of blend, kind of the next step down in terms of shade, but also very cool toned. And I want to see if I can build up a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. A little bit more pigment in the crease here. Okay, I'm going to go back into that first shade that we started with called Transition and just kind of blend that out a little bit. This is looking a little bit dusty to me so far, but cool tones kind of always look that way to me at first, so I might be tempted to add a little bit of warmth in the crease, but I'm going to try to hold off and see what the look shapes up like without it. I'm now taking a slightly smaller brush into the shade Smoke, which is a nice kind of cool-ish chocolate brown matte. And I'm going to start building up the outer corner. And also blending that shade a little bit into the crease as well. And then for shimmers, I think I actually am going to try to follow kind of what the labels are saying. So I'm going to take the shade Inner Corner, which is already confusing because there's 2 inner corners, but I'm taking the more kind of silvery taupey inner corner. And then I'm also going to take this shade here for center eyelid, and then this one here for outer eyelid, and just kind of create a taupey, silvery, cool toned gradient across the eyes. So starting with the more kind of silvery taupe of the 2 inner corner shades, I'm just going to put that kind of in the inner corner, but also just like the start of my eyelid. Wow, a little tiny dab of that shade really stretches and goes a long way. That's really pretty. I actually really like that shade. Okay, and then right next to it, the shade Center Eyelid is a little bit deeper and more gray and silvery, so I'm going to put that one kind of in the center here. And then into the shade Outer Eyelid. Just connecting that up with the center shade. These shimmers are really opaque. It's almost like covering up completely the mattes that I had on underneath. So I wonder if this is better suited to the Natasha Denona technique of putting your shimmer down first and then using the matte to just blend the edges. I think this is probably the coolest toned eye look I've ever done on my channel. I'm just going to go back in with my brush and kind of blend those edges a little bit. Something about this look that's feeling very 90s to me, or very like maybe early 2000s. Not in a bad way, it's just, yeah, it's the silveryness of the eye is definitely bringing me back to the early 2000s. So I think I'm going to go back into Smoke, which is that more brown matte shade, for the lower lash line. Okay, and then on an even smaller and denser brush, this is a Spectrum in KJH 12. I'm gonna go in with the shade Lash Line, which is the deepest shade in the palette, and it's sort of like a charcoal gray. And I'm just gonna put that right up very close to the lash line, like the label says. I just add a little touch of that on the outer corner on the upper lash line as well, instead of liner. All right, so this is the look so far. I'm gonna run and add some mascara, and then I will be back to show you the finished product of look number 1. Okay, so here is the finished look with mascara, and I like it. I think it might be a little bit 90s, a little bit maybe Y2K even, but I feel like it's actually pretty flattering. There's something about the tones of especially those 2 shades on the innermost part of my eyes that is very brightening, and I don't feel very washed out like I do with some other gray shadows I've used. So pleasantly surprised by this first look, but I will go ahead and send you over to look number 2. All right, I'm back for look number 2, and I think today, since yesterday's look was so cool toned, I might want to pull for some of the warmer tones in here and do something kind of bronzy. Maybe play with a little bit of the more golden tones in here. I think I'm actually gonna do what I'm calling the Natasha Denona method of applying eyeshadow. Obviously she didn't come up with it, but I do see her use it a lot when she's applying her palettes, which is applying the shimmer first and then using a matte to buff out the edges. That's not typically how I do my eyeshadow, but I thought it might be fun to try, which also means I'm gonna be going kind of darkest to lightest today. So I'm actually gonna start with this shade here. This is another one of the outer eyelid shades, and I'm just gonna put that all over the lid to start. Sorry if my lighting's weird, by the way. There is a literal thunderstorm right outside that window. I think we are getting hit with some of the rain from Hurricane Beryl. Is it Beryl? Have any of you all gotten storms coming through? I hope you are all okay and being safe. All right, we've got that shade all over the lid, so there's a nice kind of dark base, but it is looking very messy. So I'm now going to take the shade Crease. This is definitely the warmest matte in the palette, and I actually had this shade in my palette that I built out of singles for my wedding day. So I already know that I like this shade for warming up the crease, which is exactly what I'm going to use it for today, and also just kind of blending out that deeper shade on the lid. I'm just going to touch back into the first shimmer shade that we use and make sure that I haven't buffed it completely away in the crease, and then go back in and softly buff the edges. I mean, this technique definitely works, but I still just like applying my mattes first. I don't know. What do you all do? Do you apply your shimmers and then blend out? Or are you like me and you do the mattes first? I think I just like having the groundwork laid for my eye look before I go in with the most kind of impactful part, which for me is usually the shimmers. Although this shade is looking less like a shimmer and more like a satin, which I think is another reason why this palette must be so popular, is it's not quite as dramatic and in your face as some of the other Natasha shimmer formulas. It's definitely more of a soft, kind of refined look to the eye, which I definitely don't mind. There's a time and a place for lots of drama and impact, and I do love it, but sometimes you want something a little bit, I don't know, just more sophisticated feeling. I'm not sure what the word is, but I don't mind a satin, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I wonder if something like the NYX glitter glue applied first would make that shadow have more of a shimmery pop to it, because it definitely is just sort of a very gentle wash with some subtle shimmer in it, the way that I've applied it today. I usually don't use a glitter primer with Natasha Denona, but maybe it would be worth trying with this palette. I'm gonna take a little bit of the Most True Gold in the palette. It's a center eyelid shade, and I am gonna put that in the center eyelid. This is much more of a traditional shimmer formula with a lot of impact to it, and much more of what I'm used to. It is very sparkly, glimmers when the light catches it. Definitely takes the look from more of a classic kind of smoky eye to something with a little bit more glamour to it. I kind of focus that in the center of the lid, but I'm also just taking it everywhere else as well. I think that looks really, really pretty for a nice summertime bronzy eye. I think for the lower lash line, I'm gonna go into the shade Smoke, which is this, it's still sort of cool toned, but it's the least cool toned of the deeper mattes. It's more of like that chocolate brown shade. And just connect that up. Do I need more light? Can you see me? Why didn't you say so? Just kind of connect that up with the outer corner. Do I want some liner with this look? I kind of feel like some liner would be good. I'm gonna grab my Persona 24-hour waterproof eye pencil in the shade Brown. I also use this for my wedding makeup. And I'm just gonna put a little bit of that across my lash line. Not going all the way in, just kind of keeping it to the outside half, and then a little bit on my lower lash line as well. And then I'll just dip into that Smoke shade again and kind of smudge that out and soften the line a little bit so it's not so harsh. Touching into the shade Crease one more time just to blend out that outer edge. And a little bit of the edge on the bottom lash line. I think this is a really pretty smoky eye. Do I want something in the inner corner though? I think for the inner corner, I'm gonna take the shade Inner Corner. Yesterday, there's two inner corner shades, just to make things really confusing. There's two inner corner shades, one of which is more cool tone and silvery, and the other one is more of a, it's kind of a peachy champagne. So I'm gonna use this one today, and I'm just gonna go into the inner corner. That's really, really pretty. I'm actually tempted to touch a tiny bit of that inner corner shade just right through the center of the lid, just for some extra dimension there. And I think that is a really pretty bronze goddess kind of summery brown smoky eye. So let me go put some mascara on real quick and I will come back to show you the finished look. Okay, and here is the finished look with mascara. I think that this is really cute. This actually reminds me of a lot of the looks that I used to do with my OG Naked palette. And the look yesterday reminded me a lot of the looks that I would do with my Urban Decay Smoky palette. Just really classic, easy, flattering, pretty eye makeup. With both of the looks so far, I thought I was gonna end up with a really dark, dramatic, just very, very smoky situation. And both have ended up being a lot lighter and more just soft than I thought they would. So I don't know, that gives me a new perspective on this palette because when you look at it, it kind of does look dark. And with the exception of some of like this shade looks really light in the palette, but for the most part, it doesn't look like a super soft palette. It looks very intense for lighter skin tones. And so I don't know, I think I'm pleasantly surprised with how flattering the looks so far have been, but this is it for look number 2. So let me pass you on now to the third and final look. Okay, so for look number 3, I'm kind of looking at the palette and trying to figure out what shades I haven't used yet. I haven't used these two, so they're really kind of more pink shimmer and this other outer eyelid shade that's sort of in the middle between taupey and bronze. So maybe we will go with that. Do something a little bit more pinky on the lids with a deeper outer corner. I don't know, let's just start and see where we end up. So I'm gonna start with the shade Crease, which is that warm crease shade. And I am going to put that in you guessed it, the crease. I should have probably said earlier in the video, but for all of these looks, I have primed my eyes with the Ulta Matte Eye Primer, which is my favorite eyeshadow primer these days. It was a recommendation that I got in a comment on one of my videos, and I need to go back and find out who that was because I need to thank them. That is such a good, affordable eyeshadow primer. And I typically set it with my face powder, and a lot of times I will set the entire lid with a eyeshadow that matches my skin tone as well. I haven't done that for these looks. I've just set with my face powder, mainly because there's no lid setting shade in this palette. I mean, this one is the closest that we have, but even that one's a little bit too gray. So this is without a lid setting shade how these shadows are going onto my eyes. I do like to have usually a lid setting shade down with Natasha Denona's formula just because it's a very hydrated formula, and I feel like it can kind of be difficult to blend because of that sometimes. So having a really dry base that you're blending it on can make the blending easier, at least for me. But so far I feel like the blending has been pretty good with this palette, even without the extra step of a lid setting shade. I'm now going to take the shade Smoke. I'm taking this on a small and sort of dense brush, and I'm going to apply this along the lash line and out into a little bit of a wing. And then with another small and kind of dense brush, I'm going to go in with the shade Blend, which is right next to Smoke, but a touch lighter. And I'm just going to blend that out so that it's soft, but starting to get some definition and depth on the outer corner of the eyes. And then just going back in with my blending brush and that first shade to just blend that outer corner into the look. Okay, and then I'm actually going to take that same brush I used with the shade Smoke, and I'm going to dip into the outer eyelid shade on the top row here. I typically use my fingers with most shimmers, but I have noticed that Natasha Denona uses a brush with a lot of her shades, so I figured we could give that a try. And I'm just going to put that kind of right over those mattes that we put down. And then a little bit in towards the center of the lid. I feel like that's actually working quite well with just a dry brush. Again, because her formulas are just so hydrated, it's almost like some of her shades are one step away from being creams. So that makes sense why they pick up on a dry brush so well. And then just with another flat brush, I'm going to dip into the pink center eyelid shade. It's the most pink leaning shade in the palette. And just apply that on the inner half of the lid, right up to meet that other shimmer that we put down first. And just kind of tapping it over the line to blend the two together. Same thing on the other eye. I think that's looking pretty good. So for the lower lash line, I'm going to dip into the shade Smoke again, which was that deeper matte. Kind of connect up with the outer corner. And then let's do a little bit of shimmer on the lower lash line. I haven't done that yet. So I'm going to go back into that taupey outer eyelid shade and just put that kind of in the center of my lower lash line and blend it in to that matte shade. Just tapping off my brush really well to hopefully avoid fallout. Since I am putting this on just a dry brush, and then just a little bit of that pinky shade right at the start of my lash line here. And then to finish everything off, I'm going to take this shade at the bottom corner here called Brow Bone, which I don't think I've used yet. I'm just going to flip my brush over, grab a little bit of that on my brush, and put that in the inner corner. This one's sort of like a goldy champagne. So you have a very gold, a very champagne, and then a very goldy champagne kind of mixed between the two in terms of brow bone or inner corner options. And then of course there's that really, really silvery inner corner option as well. I think this looks really pretty, but just for science, I'm going to see what happens if I go over those shimmers with my fingers, just to see if they get a little bit punchier. Okay, so this is the side I re-intensified with my fingers, and this is the side I just applied with a brush. So you might get a tiny bit more impact with your fingers. It just depends if you want something a little bit more delicate and kind of like a slight sheen, or if you want something a little bit more punchy. I think both are really pretty, but let me just match these up. All right, and that is our finished look. I'm gonna run and do mascara, and then I will come back, show you the finished look, and finish out this video. Okay, so here is that finished look with mascara. Again, I keep going in with the assumption that these looks are going to be really smoky and dramatic, and then they keep turning out very delicate is the word that I want to use, like very light, everyday, wearable, office appropriate maybe. And I'm not really 100% sure why that is. It's almost like the shadow, I don't want to say it disappears from my eyes, but it seems like it almost just mellows. And it also might be that there's so much reflective shimmer in the shimmer shades that it just catches the light beautifully and makes my eye area look very bright and awake and light rather than dark and smudgy and smoky. So depending on your preferences, this could be a great thing or it could be an annoyance to you. I think if you look at this palette and you feel intimidated by all of the depth or the smokiness, it might be really nice to know that a lot of these shimmers will just immediately lighten up a look if you feel like you've gone too dark or too smoky. But if on the other hand, you look at this palette and think, oh yes, perfect, I love really dark, smoky, intense looks. Also just something to be aware of. There is no black in this palette, which I think is kind of weird. Not weird, but it just would have made sense to me to have a black in here because this charcoal gray color is not deep. It is very much sort of a soft gray and not even a soft black. It's definitely more of a soft gray. So I'm a little bit surprised by this palette, but I also think I'm surprised in maybe a good way for me and my everyday makeup wearing life, because this could definitely be much more of an everyday palette than I first thought it would be. But I also know that I'm pretty late to the game when it comes to the Natasha Denona Glam palette, and that many of you probably have this palette, have had this palette, and have been using it for years. So I would love to hear from you in the comments down below about the ways that you like to use this palette, maybe your favorite shades or your go-to looks. Do you find you reach for this palette for more of a smoky, dramatic vibe, or is it more of a lightweight, everyday palette for you? Or does it kind of do both? I feel like it's definitely a nice palette to have in your collection, and it definitely reminds me of like an upgraded version of those comfort palettes that I used to use all the time when I was first starting to get into makeup, like the original Urban Decay Naked palettes. Definitely gives me that kind of a vibe, just with an upgraded formula. I really had fun with all the looks in this video. I would love to know which one is your favorite, 1, 2, or 3. So let me know in a comment down below, and give the video a like if you liked it. Hopefully some of you found this helpful if you're looking for inspiration to use your glam palette or just other similar neutral shades that you have at home. If you're new, I would love to have you subscribe if you love eyeshadow content. I post a lot of eyeshadow related videos and other videos talking about makeup as well. I will hope to see you in my next video. So until then, I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.